The
Yes,
the
it's
the
London.
the World Cup was, I'm not sure if I'll say life changing. I'll say life defining. In
Mhm.
that I was a student at Howard University in 1989 when we failed to qualify, and I cried then. I never thought I'd see Trinidad and Tobago play at a World Cup. I was a fan of Trinidad and Tobago a long time before I was a player. I didn't think as a fan I'd see our national team on football's biggest stage. So for all of a sudden to not only see Trinidad and Tobago play, but to be a part of that.
It was June 10th, 2006, Germany, the FIFA World Cup. Trinidad and Tobago, the smallest nation ever to qualify, facing Sweden, ranked among the best in the world. And then came that moment. Shaka Hislop called into the starting lineup at the last minute, stepped onto the pitch and produced one of the greatest goalkeeping performances in World Cup history. Save after save. Calm, commanding, unshakable. He kept the Giants of Sweden scoreless. A 0-0 result, or as you would say, nil-nil result, that felt like a victory for an entire region. A night where the Caribbean stood tall on the global stage. Today, we dive into the man behind that moment, the journey, the mindset, the resilience, and the Caribbean spirit that poured it all. I am Robert Charles, and this is another episode of Caribbean Sports Gallery. And our guest for this episode, Shaka Hislop. Or should I say Neil Shaka Hislop? Each week, this podcast explores the untold stories behind Caribbean sports, cricket, football, track, basketball, and beyond. From athletes' profile to game-changing moments, cultural movements, the economic impact. We dig into the victories, the controversies, and the legacy of sport on the islands. Whatever the episode, you are going to learn something you won't find anywhere else. Trust us on this. Caribbean sports is different. So let's get into it. Shaka, Mr. Shaka Hislop, welcome to Caribbean Sports Gallery. It's an honor, great honor, pleasure to have you, sir. Tell us, who is Shaka Hislop and what are you up to these days?
Thank you very much for having me, Robert. Um, I'm not sure how I describe myself here. Named Shaka Hislop. I'm a son of the soil of Trinidad and Tobago. Well, I was born in England to Trinidadian parents. My dad was finishing law school in England, moved back to Trinidad when I was just 2 years old. So Trinidad is all I know as home. In the years since then. It took me through high school, St. Mary's College. I went to university at Howard University in the US, played professional football for 15 years, and now I am drawing in on 17 years of working for the self-described worldwide leader in sports in and ESPN, covering the game that has served me so well over the years. I'm a husband and a father, most proudly, of five incredible kids. Um,
Mm.
and I'm not sure where else I go from there. In all honesty, I'm kind of still in awe of this journey of mine.
Well, Shaka, once again, welcome. You know, there is so much, and I peeped at your profile a little while ago. And if I dig into that, then we'll not do the show. I will just go into everything, your achievements from club to club to club to representing TNT. But we're gonna look at that somewhere as we move along, hopefully. But you know, it is said that every great Caribbean athlete start with a powerful original story. And but I think we have already begun with yours because you were born in England, you just said, but
Mhm.
you grew up here. And how did that environmental change shape the athlete that you became?
I'm not sure if I'll describe it as an environmental change. I was 2 years old. I had no understanding, I have no recollection of my environment in England to start with. As I said, my dad um, got married while he was in law school, completed law school, and once he did, moved the family back to Trinidad. So I have no recollection. So I grew up in Diego Martin. That's all I know as
Mm.
home. Um, and that's where I guess I'm shaped. I'm shaped as a kid of Diego Martin and through high school at St. Mary's College. Um, so I wouldn't describe it as an environmental change. It was an understanding of
Understanding.
who I was and what I represented in this world. And I think there are advantages to growing up in a small country such as Trinidad and Tobago, especially one with our history. And I'm going way back
Hmm.
and talking about colonialism and how that shapes a lot of who we are as a people. But also growing up in a country where I saw people who look like me do every manner of work. From menial tasks to corner offices. So I never grew up feeling that anything was beyond me. I saw my father live that. I saw my father work his way through some of the racism and
Hmm.
discrimination of England in the late 50s and early 60s to become the man that who he was. And if I do have an origin story, I guess that's it. Just recognizing who my father was, recognizing what he had to go through to become the man that he was, and how he used those experiences, his accomplishments, for the betterment of so many different communities throughout Trinidad and Tobago. That for me is will always be my defining example, and I guess to use your term, Robert, my origin story.
Wonderful, wonderful. But what was your earliest memory, if you can go back that far, of realizing you had something special, and what created that spark?
I'm not sure, if anybody ever or any professional who ever who's accomplished great things ever kind of feels at one point that they have something special. Again, I grew up as most kids do or certainly did in Trinidad and Tobago at the
Mhm.
time, playing both football and cricket at a decent level. I felt I was better at football. And even though I'd become a goalkeeper at age 10 and kind of broke into the East Zone team, even though I was living in Diego Martin and eventually national team, I'm not so sure I ever thoroughly enjoyed being a goalkeeper. It eventually was obvious that it was my best position on the park. I enjoyed cricket, but wasn't that good at it either. Um, and you just kind of I continued in the game because I enjoyed it, because my friends played, and that was a good way for us to stay connected and enjoy each other's company. And you just continue to progress from there. And one step just kind of takes care of the next. So I'm playing in the national junior teams, kind of coming up and learning through that experience, and then I get to not just Form 5, but Form 6 in CIC, and you wonder what's next. And like most people at the time, it was a soccer scholarship because there was no real representation in terms of playing the professional game, certainly at
Mhm.
that time. Not until Dwight went to Aston Villa, probably, I think that might have been 1990 or thereabouts. Um, but I went to university, and again, just thinking I'll get a degree, which I did in engineering, and go on to pursue that as a career path. So only as I'm coming to the end of my time at Howard University and considering what's next, I had an internship. Well, I don't want to sound overly boasting, but I did an internship at NASA headquarters at the end of my junior year. My mentor at the time, a guy by the name of Greg Switek, I was speaking with him about what was to come in a year's time, and he said, "Listen, you want to give football a try? Give it a shot. You know, if it doesn't work out, fine. You can come back to engineering. You can do your masters. I certainly had the grades to get me into grad school." Um, and take it from there. But you don't want to be an engineer wondering what if. It's better just to give it that one shot, and if you fail, so be it. And that's what I decided to do. I decided I'd give it one shot. As fortune would have it, Reading, who were in at the time in what was then known as the second division, in today's money is League One, offered me a trial. If Reading didn't sign me onto a pro contract, I would go back to the US and do a master's degree. As it happened, they did, and the rest, as they say, is history.
There's history. And you know, you said something a while ago. You did not enjoy goalkeeping, but I think
Yeah.
we enjoyed it, and Trinidad and Tobago love you eternally for that. That you did not
Thank you very
enjoy.
much. It
Enjoy
worked
it.
out. It served me well in the end, but I still describe myself as a frustrated striker.
Yeah, I got that. I got that. But in the Caribbean, you know, talent, it is only half the story. The other half is obstacles. And we have seen, we have heard, we hear stories about obstacles. But in your case, what was the biggest challenge you faced early in your career? And how did that, well, how did you find the strength to push through? Because, you know, and just to touch back a bit, you enjoyed cricket. You love cricket more than football. But
No, no,
eventually,
no, 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 no. I enjoyed cricket, but not more
you
than football.
enjoyed cricket more
Yeah,
than
yeah, not
football.
more than football.
You
No, yeah,
enjoyed cricket, but
yes, no, no, not more than football.
not more than football.
But I did enjoy it.
So,
Um, So in terms of obstacles, again, it's maybe a little bit difficult for me to define. Probably the most difficult time I had in my professional sporting career, was my first year in England. I had a life in the US at Howard University. I had a girlfriend that I was madly in love with, that I had to kind of separate myself from in pursuing this wild dream. Um, and then I get to England, the weather is awful, the food isn't great. I don't have any kind of friend group or social circle, certainly not in Reading. I had a few friends not far away in London. Um, and it was a difficult time for me adjusting to what was needed of me, both professionally um and personally. And in all honesty, at the end of that first year, I considered just packing it in. I remember speaking to my dad at the time. I'd signed as I mentioned, I'd gone on trial with Reading. After 2 months of being on trial and seeing other trialists come and go, Reading eventually offered me a 2-year contract. Um, I at the end of that first year, as I mentioned, I struggled incredibly, and considered not going back. My father's advice at the time was simple and to the point. Just, we honor contracts. That's who we are. You sign for 2 years, you go back, you see the second year out, and if you're still not enjoying it, if things still aren't working out, well then you just call it a day, and you pursue engineering or whatever else you may decide to. And that's what I did. As I said, I went back to England pretty much with the intent of seeing out that last year and then figuring out next steps. As it turned out, I go back to Reading for pre-season. The manager calls me into his office. He said, for financial reasons, we had to sell the starting goalkeeper, a gentleman by the name of Steve Francis, and now, the position is yours, pretty much. Not to be blunt, but we can't afford to bring anybody else in. And that season, I played every single game. The team got promotion. I was offered a new contract, and that was my career up and running. And then all of a sudden, things kind of, I don't want to say settled down, but that was probably the largest of my hurdles, that initial one. Because again, I felt if I didn't get through that, obviously, I question as to whether I'd be sitting here chatting with you, Robert.
we never know. And that's the thing, we can't see the future. We can't
Correct.
read into the future. Sometimes we just have to play it as it comes and
Correct.
hope for the best. And in your case, as you say, the history is there. But you know, every athlete has that one moment that fans never forget. But there's always one more to it, or more to it than people see.
Hmm.
You know, which game, race, or performance do you feel defined your legacy? And what was happening behind the scenes that the public, that we, fans of Shaka Hislop, never heard of?
Well, I often joke that I had a career that lasted 15 years and some 500 odd games, but I'm remembered for two games back to back: the 2006 FA Cup final which West Ham lost on penalties to Liverpool, and then that opening game of the World Cup, which was my next professional performance against Sweden. So 500 games, all everybody seems to remember are these two that happened back to back in 2006. Those for me are probably the games that would define I think rightly so define my career. You know, my last in English football after 14 years of playing playing professionally in England, and my second to last and first game at a World Cup, first game for Trinidad and Tobago at the World Cup. Those are the games that I'm most remembered for, and probably the ones that I remember best.
Did you would you say those were life-changing moments,
No.
or how did you
Well,
see yourself going there?
the World Cup was, I'm not sure if I'll say life changing. I'll say life defining. In
Mhm.
that I was a student at Howard University in 1989 when we failed to qualify, and I cried then. I never thought I'd see Trinidad and Tobago play at a World Cup. I was a fan of Trinidad and Tobago a long time before I was a player. I didn't think as a fan I'd see our national team on football's biggest stage. So for all of a sudden to not only see Trinidad and Tobago play, but to be a part of that
To be there.
opening game. It was it was a footballing dream come true. It's a footballing fairy tale, and I still look back on that on both the Sweden and England games as exactly that, a footballing fairy tale. I've avoided watching the replays and highlights of both those games for that reason. I worry that if I see those games, if I watch them over, all of a sudden it becomes real and it's no longer a fairy tale, and I want to enjoy this fairy tale a little bit longer.
And Shaka, the Caribbean, we have produced and continue to produce top class or world class
Hmm.
athletes from limited resources, but yet the results are undeniable. What do you think gives Caribbean athletes that unique edge on the global stage?
I think we have our true sense of who we are. That
Mhm.
we're just young men and women from a small corner of the world that have grown up enjoying the experiences of being from the Caribbean, enjoying the sunshine, enjoying the camaraderie, enjoying how friendly our people are, enjoying some of the struggles that comes with being from a small country, and not learning any differently. I think a lot of times we maybe draw comparisons with other countries, and I think this happens later in life. Other comparisons and what other countries have in terms of resources and how they're able to do things. But as kids, that's lost on us. That's not our experiences, and we don't look for anything else. We don't look to blame anything else. We just enjoy who we are, what we have, and make the most of it. There's also a kind of joyful spirit to who we are, and I think that's represented in our athletes and not just our athletes, but how we perform. When you look at a Usain Bolt, his successes and the smiles that he puts on people's faces, regardless of where you are from the world, just by his personality and how he goes about his business. That I don't think that is nurtured anywhere else in the world. When you look at a Brian Lara or a Viv Richards or whoever else we may talk about, Dwight York in terms of football, and how we enjoy what we do, how we are able to put smiles on people's faces. Again, I'm not sure that there are many other places in the world that can boast a high performance with a sense of enjoyment the way that we do.
And saying that recently I've been looking at some clips, different sports, and you look at us in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, I think we take the lead,
Hmm.
win, lose, or draw. At the end, we celebrate. We celebrate
Yeah.
our young people, our young athletes. Yes, there's the what in local parlance, the move along on the side and the bad talk. We cannot get away from that. But just to piggyback a little bit on what you said, that joy that you see our young people exude when they go out on the field, be it cricket, football. And I think, you rightly said, that's part of who we are and how
Correct.
we do it. But,
Absolutely.
in your journey, though, who were the unsung heroes that, somewhere behind the scenes, not in the spotlight, that you would refer to? Who did that individual or individuals that Shaka looked up to?
That's an easy answer. So I've always hold family closest to me. I spoke about my father and his impact on my life and who I was certainly in terms of personality, how I was able to negotiate some of the tougher challenges during the course of my life.
Mm,
I spoke about the girlfriend at Howard University that I was madly in love with. I can happily say that a few months ago we celebrated our 30th anniversary. We have
Wonderful.
thank you very much. We have five
Congratulations.
kids, and between them and I'm a mama's boy, which I won't even start getting into because I'm not sure we'll be able to finish. How over the years I've gone to my mother in the most difficult of times, not for advice, not for guidance, not for correction, but just simply for comfort. Um, my wife and kids have played this role in my life, and here I am chasing a boyhood dream and kind of dragging them along behind me. Yet still, when times were most difficult, it was them I could lead on. I could always lean on my wife regardless, for whatever it may be. My kids, I think, unknowingly were an anchor in my professional life, and I say this. So there are two things fatherhood kind of um, were able to guide me in, and one was a moment, and one was, I'm not sure I'll describe it as a moment, but it's a memory. Um,
Mhm.
just after my wife and I, so we got married just as I joined Newcastle, same summer. We had our eldest child, a daughter, a year later, and then a few months when she was only a few months old, she got sick. She had gastroenteritis and was hospitalized. Now, don't get me wrong, it was not life-threatening. It was not. Um, you know, I don't want to make it seem anything more than it was, but she was in hospital. At the time, I was going through a bad time at Newcastle. I wasn't playing well, and I was having a tough time. But then all of a sudden, she got sick, and it hit me as to what was important. My wife was spending days and nights at the hospital. I would go to training, have a shower, come to the hospital. She would go home, have a shower, come right back, and that was kind of our routine for a week or so, however long my daughter was in hospital. And all of a sudden, it made me realize what truly was important in this life, and that snapped me out of my poor form of the mental funk that I was in, and it just settled me down. And I think my career trajectory changed immediately on
Mm,
on that experience. And also, I always talk about, I then went on to West Ham, and we had a second and a third when I was still at West Ham. And it really didn't matter to my kids what happened. I could come home, and they said, "Oh, how the game go, Dad?" And I'm like, "Oh, we won 5-0. Oh, that's congrats. Come, let's have a tea party." And they would get their little dolls and their tea
mm,
set out, and we'd sit around and we'd have a tea party. Or I could come home and say, they'd ask, "Dad, how the game go?" And I said, "Babe, we lost 5-0. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Dad. Let's have a tea party."
let's have it.
And it also made me, fatherhood made me recognize that what happened on the field didn't matter. That's not how I was defined to them. That's not how they saw me. And again, and it allowed me to take this game as exactly that, as a game. Um, that there were things in life that were far more important, and just kind of understanding that, recognizing that, living that, I thought
Mm,
was great for my footballing career.
wonderful, wonderful. And you talk about the kids, and we have mentioned just prior to that about the Caribbean spirit. And there you just mentioned it in your children, you win, lose, or draw. you would
Hmm.
celebrate, and they would
That's right.
celebrate it without
Hmm.
without that understanding that this is what we do largely in the
Hmm.
Caribbean. But the fans, they love the glory, but they rarely see the sacrifice. What's one of the scenes or the moment, good or difficult, that truly captures the reality of being a Caribbean athlete from your point of view?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think, I mean, but like in any sport, and then dare I say any professional, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes to make anything work. We are seen, we are judged by our performances on the park. But as any good professional knows, it's what happens every other day of the week that determines what happens on the park. It's how you apply yourself, day in, day out, in terms of getting those results. It's not, you know, we also have to deal with, um, you know, similar ups and downs of life, of who we are, and yet are defined by, we go through the same kind of roller coaster of emotions and etc. as anybody else, but we are defined by 90 minutes out of that week, which at times, I guess looking at it from the outside, it may seem unfair, but that's just who we are, and you understand that, and you have to accept that, So I may wake up a morning not feeling well, but that does not matter, If I'm, you know, some people, I guess, can call in sick if they aren't feeling well or aren't feeling up to it. That's not an option for us. Mentally, you just have to understand that, and figure out how to negotiate some of those ups and downs that life inevitably throws at you.
And I was about to ask a question, but I am listening to how you answered that first part. Definitely, we can say that your life today, or your sport and life up to today, has been guided by what you just explained, what you just pointed out. Your
Mhm.
professionalism, your professional career, because look at where you are now.
Yeah, yeah, it has. I've also not been afraid to take on a challenge. I've not been afraid to
Mhm.
fail. Most importantly, and I think that's, again, as an athlete, you're so often judged by success or failure. I and you can't be daunted by the prospect of failure, as defining as it may be. You can't let that limit you. If I wasn't prepared to fail, or somebody say no to me, I wouldn't have left the comfort and the secure, kind of career path that Howard University and engineering offered me. If I wasn't prepared to fail and be embarrassed on the biggest of stages, I wouldn't have accepted Newcastle's offer. You can look at every aspect of our professional career, and recognize that you have to take on these challenges. When they're successful, we applaud them. We're lauded.
Mhm.
We're, dare I say, invited onto podcasts. But oftentimes, there's failure behind those, and there are those stories. And I think certainly as athletes who've achieved, we understand that, and we sympathize with those, because at different times we've all had our feelings, and it's how you manage those feelings, I think, ultimately, um, how you're defined.
you know, and saying that you just joggled my mind back to I was at a calypso competition one time, if I might just slip this in there, and one of the competitors, she forgot a verse in her song.
Hmm.
The good Paul Keynes Douglas, he said afterwards, he said, any one of us can make or will make a mistake. He
Correct.
said, but what do we do after
Hmm.
that mistake, or after that bad moment? Because that young lady, she made a mistake, but it didn't stop her
Yeah.
from her bearing. And I think life should be like that, because every day we will not be up. There will be ups, there will be downs, and I like to say there will be ups, downs, sideways, and in betweens.
Yeah.
But we've got
Yeah.
to go. But if you could relive or rewrite one moment in your career, Whether it was triumph, heartbreak, what would it be and why?
No, I won't rewrite anything of it. I've also learned over the years not to live in any regret. I've 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 taken on challenges. I've made decisions around my career, taken on challenges, and given each of those the best that I could. If I start looking at moments and I wish one aspect of it had gone differently or something of the sort, who knows what the knock-on effect of that would be. And you constantly live in regret as a result. You start questioning every single decision. I don't think you ever stop at one in terms of what would I change. You start regretting every single decision. So I've kind of conditioned myself. Not to look back on any of these aspects with any kind of regret. I am incredibly proud of the career that I've had. I look back on it with such fond memories, a sense of pride, a sense of accomplishment, and I'm not going to change any aspect of that.
Well said, well said. And that's a good lesson,
Mm,
very good lesson, especially for younger athletes. Good lesson for them, good lesson for us, even as the adults. But
mm.
we have thousands of young Caribbean boys and girls watching this video and who have followed Shaka. And they dream there's, to follow in your footsteps. But what's your message to the next generation of Caribbean athletes coming up in this time?
I would say dream big, first of all, and start to get an understanding, a sense of what it takes to achieve those dreams. I when one of the things that I think and I think it's more human nature than Caribbean nature. There's a saying, but I can't remember who from that I love. If people aren't laughing at your dreams simply aren't big enough. Um, have those big dreams. Allow people to laugh at those big dreams, but then you have to go out and chase them. Understand what it takes in chasing those dreams. Um, that would be my advice. And then even if you don't achieve those big dreams, I think the act of chasing them, um, mentally, psychologically, in many regards, physically, puts you in a far better place than if you didn't have those big dreams, if you settled for what was an accepted mediocrity. Um, you find yourself in a far better place, and then all of a sudden, in chasing those grand dreams, you find yourself in a position that many others will not be able to boast of. That would be my advice. Now, it takes a lot of work behind the scenes.
Mhm.
I read another quote the other day, and I have a feeling I'm going to butcher this. Um, if you want to be cheered in front of millions, you've got to be prepared to uh, to, to work when no one is watching, or something. That quote is badly butchered, but you understand what I'm saying. It's
You
what
get
you're
the message.
prepared to
You get the
do
message.
is what you're prepared to do when nobody's watching, when nobody's paying you any mind, and be prepared to do that with some consistency. That ultimately defines
Great advice. One that I somehow will definitely take a little bit and follow.
you.
But when the history books are written and future generations look back on your career, what do you hope they remember you for, both on and off the field?
um, simply put, that I made the best of a limited skill set. Um, that and I did show, hoping that I represented who I was, every aspect of who I was to the best of my ability. Whether we're talking about the son of George and Gina Hislop, whether we're talking about the husband to Desha Hislop, or the father to any of my five kids, or simply as a Trinidad and Tobagonian, going on to the world stage in different aspects, whether we're talking sport or broadcasting. And I tried to give it my best. At times I faltered, um, But I think over the longer piece, I hope all those people that I hope I'm representing can look back on my efforts, if not my successes, with a certain level of pride.
But talking about representation, you represented Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean back then pretty well. You united us in a way that only sports can, and
Yeah.
continue to, regardless of what is said or what is done. Sports brings the Caribbean, brings Trinidad and Tobago together.
Mhm.
Should I say, is it a magnet that pulls us together when we sit down and whatever the sport, but it brings us together. And you continue to represent us pretty well, because whenever I turn on the sports news and I hear that voice, boy, I would listen. I don't care what you're talking about once I hear Shaka Hislop. And I think you have that effect on everybody who likes sports, watch sports, or want to get involved in sports. So this has been another chapter in Caribbean Sports Gallery, preserving the stories, legacy, and cultural impact of the region's greatest athletes. So we say a huge thank you to Mr. Neil Shaka Hislop, for sharing his journey, his wisdom, and of course his Caribbean spirit with us. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if there's any athlete sports story that you want to feature next, drop us a comment. Shaka, any parting words for us?
I'll just close by saying thanks for having me. It's always great to walk down memory lane, to again relive different parts of my life so far. And I hope that so many of us in the Caribbean can understand that chasing our dreams is as much our rights as anybody else's. We are not limited by who we are, by where we're from. As a matter of fact, I think there's no greater gift. Um, so I'm looking forward to somebody else coming along, writing their story, and me being able to quietly sit and enjoy those stories that always seem to come from the Caribbean.
Once again, Shaka, huge thank you. I am Robert Charles, and this has been Caribbean Sports Gallery, researched and produced by Dr. Zainul Khan, a show where every legend has a story.